In my work with people, which is what I do most days, I find that not only am I working on helping people deal with things that have happened to them personally, but also looking at patterns of interaction between my clients and other significant people in their world. So be it their spouse, or be it a parent, a teacher, a child, a friend, but looking at different patterns of interaction between people. And it got me thinking that I needed to do some more training in this area. And so a very good friend and colleague of mine runs some really great courses on looking at interactional patterns that exist between people, and how as human beings we all employ different patterns in our interactions with one another. And some of those patterns are healthy and effective, and some of those patterns are unhealthy and ineffective, and can cause distance and can cause difficulties in our relationships. And so from my training in interactional pattern analysis with my friend and colleague Jeannie Cavey, I then spent a bit of time just developing some concrete tools that would really explain to clients what these patterns of interaction mean and what they look like. And so I just thought that it might be helpful for me to just share a few of those interactional patterns with you, and I'm going to use some of the concrete tools that I developed to explain these to you. And so one of the things that we look at in relationships is something that we call clarity of self-presentation. And basically, so Jeannie would say that clarity of self-presentation actually refers to how visible you are in your relationships. So either we can present a clear picture of ourselves in our interactions with others, or we can present quite an unclear, vague picture of ourselves in our relationships with others. And generally we tend to find that a person who has clarity in their way of interacting with others generally elicits acceptance and confirmation from the people around them, because people know where they stand with you and nothing's really left to people guessing or kind of filling in the blanks. Because generally what happens as humans is we tend to fill in the blanks if the information's not given to us. So I often say to clients, we finish the story in our head, and often it's not quite accurate. And then you find when you actually do communicate with a person about whatever the issue might be, you find that the story that you created in your head is quite different. And so that's where clarity is so important. And then we often find that a person who lacks clarity in how they present themselves, they generally might tend to be vague or distant, or maybe they're incongruent, which means that they might present differently at different times, which means that people can't really get a grasp on who they are, and they might be difficult to follow. And very often this can result in distance being created in relationships, and people can move away because it's not easy to be around someone who lacks clarity. And then very often for that person, it can feel like rejection to them. So what I tend to use in therapy with my clients to explain this to them is I give them a card like this, and it's actually just a really simple story. I just chose an excerpt from the very well-known story of Cinderella. And so what I do first actually is I give clients this card, which is pretty blurred, and it's actually quite hard to read. And I say to my clients, I'm just going to give you something. It's a short excerpt. Won't you read it to me? And very often my client will say to me, but I'm actually not able to read this. It's not clear enough. And I say to them, well, just give it a try. See if you can read it. And they really try, and it's basically impossible to read because it's so blurry. And then I say to them, okay, now I'm going to give you another card. And on this card, there's a very clear version of exactly the same excerpt. And I say to my client, could you read this for me now? And they can very easily read it. And then this sets the scene for us to discuss this interpersonal variable, as we call them, or this interpersonal pattern of clarity. And so I say to clients, if we've identified in our sessions that they really struggle to be clear in their presentation of themselves, that I say to them, it's like the person on the receiving end trying to read this very blurry version of the Cinderella extract, and it's very hard to read it. So you might the person reading it might fill in the blanks, or they guess, they get bored. It's not a pleasurable task. Whereas when I give them the card that's got the very clear font, they're able to read it very easily. And so in that way, it's a very concrete way of showing clients what clarity and visibility, as I said earlier, what visibility in relationships looks like. So what does it look like to be congruent, to be the same? What does it look like to not be vague? What does it look like to be quite specific? What does it look like to effectively express your needs? So expression of need ties in very much with clarity, because someone who ineffectively expresses their needs often lacks clarity. So expression of need can be done vaguely. So I might have a need and I might allude to it, but I do it very vaguely. It can be done in a blaming way. It can be done in a complaining way. Or it can be done with clarity. So I often use a very simple example with clients, and I say to them, when I'm talking about effective expression of need, I'll say to them, so if I said to you, oh, I didn't even get to have a cup of coffee this morning. And I say to them, what am I expressing to you? And they say, well, maybe that you wanted a cup of coffee. And then I say to them, and what if I say, yeah, it would probably be nice if maybe there was some coffee that I might be able to have. And that's quite a vague expression of my need. Or I say to them, and what if I said to you, I'd really, really like a cup of coffee. Seeing as you're making a cup, please could I also have a cup of coffee? That's a very clear expression of my need. So the person knows exactly what I need. They know exactly what I've asked for, and there's no guessing around it. So I haven't presented my need to the other person as a complaint, or I haven't blamed them and said, you never make me coffee anymore. And I haven't said it vaguely. So that's just a very simple example that I often use in my sessions with clients to explain the different ways that sometimes we tend to express our needs. And so there's that very clear link between expression of need and clarity. So just to kind of summarize there, that in our interactions with others, a pattern that can be very difficult in relationships is when a person lacks clarity in their self-presentation. So they could be very vague, or they might be quite invisible. So they might not express their needs, be very much in the background, not kind of put a foot forward, possibly be very afraid of potential conflict, but it can make interpersonal interaction very difficult. And something that is interesting just to think about is that our psychological wellness as human beings is quite closely linked to the state of our relationships. And as humans, we built for connection. And so when our relationships are struggling, we are struggling. And so this is where I found this recent training that I've done in interactional pattern analysis so pivotal and so vital to not only my relational health, but the relational health of my clients. And so that is the variable, or the pattern, if you will, of clarity of self-presentation. And so I hope that is just some food for thought for you in your relationships, or maybe it's something that you could pass on to someone else, is how visible are you in your relationships? How clearly are you showing up? How clearly are you expressing your needs? And are you showing up like the version of the Cinderella extract that is very clear and very easy to read? Or do you tend to show up as the very blurry, difficult to read version of the Cinderella extract that makes it very difficult for people to get through and to read, and also makes it quite easy for people to fill in the blanks and maybe fill them in inaccurately? And so I hope that this is just a little bit of food for thought for you, and that this might be helpful in your relationships. So another variable or pattern of interacting that I help clients work through is what we call confirmation. And confirmation can be described as the idea that a person knows that they are valuable and that they have a special place in another person's life. So it might be within a friendship group, within a community, within their family, to their spouse, to their child to parent, it doesn't matter. But it's basically another person knowing, or a person knowing, that they are valuable and that they hold a special place in other people's lives. And we can show confirmation to people in our relational spheres through verbal confirmation. We might say to someone, I really love you, I really appreciate you, I'm so grateful for you. We might send them a text message, we might send them a gift. There's so many ways. We might show them that they're valuable through acts of service. There's so many ways that we can show and confirm people in our relational spheres. And in her book, Relationship Breakthrough, Chloe Madani's talks about our fundamental emotional needs as humans. And one of them she speaks of is that of significance. And it's really important that as humans, we know that we hold a place of significance in other people's lives. And significance is felt when we are confirmed by others in our environment. And as human beings, because we have a need for significance, we seek confirmation from the people around us. And obviously, that can go to extreme limits where a person can spend a lot of their time overcompensating or over-accommodating in order to gain confirmation. But there is a point at which a level of healthy confirmation seeking is needed, because we all need to know that we matter and that we are significant. And so something that I find helpful to show my clients to make this variable of confirmation concrete for clients is I just very simply will take 2 polystyrene cups. And what I'm basically explaining to clients here is something that my very good friend and colleague, Jeannie Cavey, who trained me in the interactional pattern analysis approach, she calls emotional diabetes. And Jeannie explains that emotional diabetes is when a person seeks endless confirmation, but it is never enough to fill their cup. So the way that I explain this to clients is, if this is something that we've identified in therapy, that a client really struggles to receive confirmation. So maybe people in their world try and confirm them in various ways, and they tend to reject the confirmation, or they have that bias that's developed where they believe that they are not worthy of confirmation, or that things happen and they do well just because of a fluke, or because it's just luck, and they find it very hard to accept confirmation from those around them that actually, yes, I am valuable, I do hold a special place in this world, and I make a really good contribution to this world. And so what I do is I take a polystyrene cup and I put holes in the bottom of the cup, and I explain to clients that I get a dish so that the water can run into the dish. And I explain to them that emotional diabetes is like having holes in your cup. So I say to them, okay, so let's pretend that this is your emotional cup, and people in your world are confirming you in various ways, but and you seek out that confirmation. So maybe you keep doing things to please other people, or you keep performing to be noticed, or you push yourself to be the absolute best because you really need that confirmation from people in your world, but you're not able to hold on to any of that confirmation. And so what happens is what I'm going to show you now. So the water represents the confirmation. The polystyrene cup represents your emotional tank. And the holes in the bottom are maybe wounds that have wounds from things that have happened in our lives. And all of us have wounds from various traumas that we've been through and experiences that we've had that maybe have stuck with us. And it's so ingrained in the way that we see ourselves that whenever someone confirms us, we cannot accept it and we cannot retain it. And so what tends to happen is, just like this water is running through the cup, is we are just never ever able to retain that confirmation. And so at the end of the day, so all this water is obviously sitting in this dish, and this polystyrene cup is still empty. And so this is just a very practical example that I show my clients of how someone who really struggles with confirmation is quite like this polystyrene cup with holes in it. And at the end of the day, this cup is still empty, despite all the water that's been poured in. And this becomes very difficult in relationships because people get tired, I suppose, of having to confirm someone all the time. And it also becomes very difficult because when we're going through a hard time, or when we are in a situation, a relational situation, or maybe there's a situation at work where we might feel very disconfirmed, if we have almost a confirmation reserve, if I can put it like that. So this polystyrene cup, if I was to pour water into here, obviously because it's got no holes, it would retain the water. So even though I might have a difficult experience at work and I might feel very disconfirmed, if I've got a confirmation reserve in my cup, because there's no holes in my cup, I am much better able to move through that difficult situation where I felt disconfirmed, because I've got a reserve of confirmation in this cup. So I inherently know that I am worthy, that I hold a special place in this world, that I mean something to the people around me, that my life is significant. And you might be wondering, well, okay, if we all carry wounding in some way, then what does that mean for us? And so often in therapy, what we spend time doing when we identify that confirmation is something that someone really struggles with is we spend time working on how do we heal those holes. So how do we heal, work to help a client find healing from those wounds? And there's various ways that we do that in therapy. So it's almost like putting some duct tape or some insulation tape, if you will, at the bottom of this cup so that it can retain confirmation. And obviously this is a journey and a process, and it's never going to be perfect. But we can work towards having a lot fewer holes in the cup through different psychotherapeutic interventions. And so that is just another relational tip, I guess, or maybe relational insight on confirmation in relationships. And maybe this is something that you can identify with and something that you may be seeking help for, or maybe you know someone who might really be struggling with this, and this is something that you can encourage them with in terms of seeking the help that they might need in order for those holes to be patched up and for them to be able to live a life where they can retain confirmation and know that they are worthy and significant. So another variable that we look at when we are considering different patterns of interaction and when we are looking at how do we enhance relational wellness is problem solving skills. And when we are looking at problem solving skills in therapy, we look at both practical problem solving skills and then we look at interpersonal problem solving skills. And just a nice little analogy that I like to use with clients in discussing problem solving is to show them this little bucket. And I say to them, I want you to imagine that this is your life bucket. And these different stones, so I've got some quite big marbles here. I've got kind of medium gemstones, if you will, and then I've got little stones here. And I say to them, so I want you to imagine that these marbles and stones represent different aspects of your life. And some of the stones and the marbles, if you drop them, they might crack and break. Some of them are a bit more robust and won't break. And sometimes in life, we've got to reevaluate our priorities, especially when we are going through times of stress or trauma. We have to reevaluate our lives and look at, okay, what are some of the balls that might be my rubber balls or my kind of gravel stones, and maybe those are things that could give for a time, and what are my glass balls or my marbles that could chip and break and smash if I drop them. And those are kind of your non-negotiable, really, really important things in life, or relational things in life that can't be put aside. And so what I show clients is I say to them, so when a person struggles with effective problem solving, it might look like me trying to fit everything into my bucket. Oh, we have a cracked marble. But so I've got all the important big things, so to speak. And then I'm also trying here to fit in, everything else that's also important. And I'm also trying to fit in maybe smaller tasks. And as you can see, what's very obviously happening here is my life bucket is overflowing. And that is the point of this little analogy, is to show clients that when we have ineffective problem solving skills, so we might try and over accommodate, we might find it very difficult to say no to commitments, we might tend to people please, or we don't register our own need for space. It could be for a variety of reasons that we overflow, that our bucket goes to overflow. And then what tends to happen on a relational front is we have relational fallout. So you can see there's a chipped marble, some of the gemstones and the gravel stones have fallen out. And this represents, and I explain to clients that this represents relational fallout that tends to happen when we do not utilize effective problem-solving skills and we allow our life bucket to overflow. And so on a very practical level, this looks like taking stock, and maybe it means that we need to spend time emptying our life bucket and then sorting out, okay, what are the big glass non-negotiables, okay, and saying, all right, those have to go in my life bucket. All right, and then looking at your bucket and saying, okay, now, are there any of these big life tasks that I can delegate? Okay, maybe there's 2 things that I could delegate. So I take those and I put them aside. So that just gives me a little more space, okay? And then maybe I say, okay, well, let's look at the kind of middle-sized tasks, and there's actually a few things that I can put on my waiting list, so to speak. So I'll put those aside. Okay, let me put those in. Okay, that's looking good. I've still got space in my life bucket. And now these are things that they may be not exceptionally urgent, but they also are important to me. But I'm going to be really, really specific about how many of these I allow into my life bucket. And I'll pop those in. So now my life bucket is looking a lot more spacious. And I've even got a little bit of space for maybe for rest, for a bit of recreation, for a little bit of socializing. And this life bucket is not absolutely at the brim. So there's not going to be, the likelihood of there being fallout here is not high, because this is a well thought out and problem solved life bucket. And this is just a very practical way of showing clients. And we spend a lot of time looking at, okay, what are the big glass non-negotiables in your life? Okay, what are the sort of medium gemstones? What can be delegated? What can go on your waiting list? And then what are the more of the gravel stones? Are there certain things that I actually just need to say no to, or maybe I love being part of it, but I just have to pull out for the time being? And on a relational front as well, it means that we take stock of our relationships too, and maybe we look and we say, okay, which are the non-negotiable relationships in my life that I need to put time into? Okay. And all right, once I've done that, then what's the kind of next sphere of relationships? And what is on the periphery that maybe I'm too scared to let go of? Maybe I don't want to confront an issue. Maybe I feel obliged to continue a relationship or a friendship with someone. And so we look at this in therapy from both a practical problem-solving lens, so work-life balance. Do you have enough time for rest? Do you have enough time for socializing, for exercise, etc., etc.? And then we look at it on an interpersonal level, where we look at, okay, what does your life bucket look like relationally? And are you experiencing relational fallout because this bucket is just overflowing? So, yeah, that's just a little analogy that I like to use with clients. I find it really helpful in helping clients map out their life and where they're at, and to reevaluate priorities and relationships. And so I hope that this might just be helpful for you. It might be a little reminder for you to spend a little bit of time reflecting on your life bucket and what is in your life bucket. Is your life bucket overflowing, and are you experiencing relational fallout, or is there practical fallout, and where maybe it's helpful to take stock and to find ways of emptying out your life bucket and then refilling it in a way that is helpful and healthy for you and for people in your relational sphere.